So I mentioned at the end of the last video that we were going to create another project. So I'm going to close this project by going up to the File menu and selecting Close Project. And what we're going to do is create another project, this time based on that other template, the basic activity template. So I'm going to click on Start a New Android Studio Project. So once again, I'm going to accept all the default values for everything and untick the Include Kotlin Support box. But if you're using Kotlin, this time keep it ticked. So we're going to click on that checkbox now so that you can see the difference. So click on Next, then we're going to go to Next again. And then this time we're going to choose the basic activity. Once we've done that, we're going to click Next. So once we get here, we get to name the activity and layout, but notice there's a couple of extra options compared to the last video when we used the empty activity. The title will be shown on the toolbar that this template adds to the project. But note that the activity name and layout name are the same as for the empty activity template. So we're going to click on Finish at this point. And once again, Android Studio should create a basic project based on the template we selected. Now, by the way, while it's building the project, it's not uncommon to see errors on the screen, but they should clear when everything's finished. So just keep an eye down here in the bottom right-hand corner on the status bar and don't try to do anything with the project until it's finished. It'll say something like Gradle build finished in, or words to that effect once it's finished, and how long it took when it's done. You can see down here at the moment it says Gradle build running. And you can see down the bottom left-hand corner it's Gradle build finished, and we're good to go. Now, by the way, you may also see a message at the top of the screen about Gradle files having changed. This happens from time to time with some Android Studio versions, so if you do see that, click the Sync Now button link at the right-hand side as you can see on the screen there. When Android Studio is finished creating the project, you should see main activity and a layout called content_main.xml. We can see them both on the screen up here. Now the layout looks very similar to our empty activity layout from the last video, but there's also a floating action button down here so we can see at the bottom right. Now, if you're feeling cheated because the image promised you a menu, don't worry, it's there, but it doesn't appear on this layout. Now, one difference between this template and the empty activity one is that Google splits the layouts for each activity up into two different files. Content_main.xml here is the one that we'd be using to put our own widgets into, things like buttons and text boxes and anything else that we want displayed on the screen. And the floating action button lives in another file called activity_main.xml. You notice over here we've got that file, so we'll double click that to open it. So you can see that the toolbar and the floating action button can be selected when I click on them. So I can click on something and notice that when I'm doing that, it's selected. But if I go back to content_main.xml, I can't click the floating action button. And that's because they don't exist in this file, although Android Studio does display the floating action button in the preview. Now, as I click on the toolbar and the floating action button back in activity_main, notice how they're selected over the far left of the screen over here in the component tree. And when I click on the main part of the screen here, it selects the include line, which is including the layout called content_main. And you can see that over here to the right hand side. And this is called the attributes pane. So the idea is that the layout is split up to keep your widgets in a separate file from the toolbar and the floating action button. And if you wanted to, you could delete the include line and place all your widgets in here, but it's less confusing to keep them separate. Now, Google introduced this separation back in Android Studio 1.5, and that caused students at the time some confusion when they suddenly found two layout files in their projects. Now, it's possible that content_main may disappear from the template in a future version, but now that you know that content_main is just included in activity_main and that you don't have to keep your widgets separate if you don't want to, you shouldn't have any problems if things do change. And incidentally, in this version of Android Studio, the toolbar's blank even when previewing activity_main, and that does sometimes happen, but if I run the app, the toolbar would appear. So if you get a blank toolbar in preview mode, don't worry about it, it will show up when the app is run. Alright, now before I finish talking about templates, let's have a quick look at the main activity file. Now there's quite a bit more code in this version than in the empty activity gear template from the previous video, but it's all to do with the setting up of the floating action button and the toolbar. Now there's two methods or functions if you were looking at this in the Kotlin course that weren't present before, on Create Options menu and on Options Item Selected. Now they're used to set up the menu and detect which menu items tapped. Also, there's code in on Create to cause the toolbar to be drawn and to allow clicks on the floating action button to be detected. Now, if I don't want all that, I can just delete it. Now in the onCreate method, I'm going to go into there. I'm going to actually delete all but the first 2 lines. So everything from here down to the end of the right curly brace there, I'm going to delete, like so. And then I'm going to delete entirely the onCreate options menu function and also the onOptions items selected. So once I do that, we basically end up with the same code as the previous template would have given us. And by the way, I can also delete activity_main. I can come over here, right click and select delete. I can go ahead and ignore those warnings. Click on delete anyway. And that's removed activity_main from this project. And then what I could do is rename content_main to activity_main. I can come over here and right click that, click on refactor, and select rename, and change that to activity_main.xml, and click on refactor. Now sometimes you might get an error doing that on a Mac or a Windows machine. And if that happens, just right click and choose copy. So if the rename didn't go through, just right click and select copy for the content_main XML file and select copy and paste, and then choose activity_main as the file name, and then you'll be able to delete content_main. But in this case, you can see that the rename worked okay. So now that I've done that, notice over here there's this exclamation mark. And if you click on that to show it, we've got an error down here. We can scroll it up to have a bit of a look at it. And it's just basically a warning about the fact that the surrounding layout did not actually include this layout. Basically it's saying it's no longer shown inside another layout, but we don't need to worry about that at this stage. And what we can do instead is come over here to the text tab, and by clicking on that we can see the XML for the layout. Now you don't need to worry about this XML very often, although it's very helpful if you select it and paste it all into your question if you have a problem with a layout not working. What we can do to remove the error is delete the tools show in line, this line up here, which is what Android Studio is essentially suggesting that we actually do. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, delete it, making sure that I leave the last greater than sign there, and put that back in like so. And if we go back and click on the design tab now, notice that the error is not highlighted anymore. We haven't got a red exclamation mark anymore. So we created a project using the basic activity template, but then we changed it to be exactly the same as the one created with the empty activity template. Now, I don't expect you to remember all of that, nor be able to do it yourself just yet, but by the time you finish the course, all of what we've done will make sense. So that's templates. They're just templates generating common code to save you having to type it, but there's nothing magical about them. You're completely free to make any change you want to once Android Studio has created the project from the template. Now, if Android Studio changes in the future and templates with these exact names are no longer available, you just want to choose ones that look similar. And you can always delete any code that doesn't appear in the videos or add any code that I have in the video, but which is missing from the template. Alright, so let's move on to the next video where we're going to start coding up our first app. See you in the next video.